15 years ago, I was Melissa Evans, a rising marketing executive with a corner office and a reputation for breaking glass ceilings. Today, I'm just Melissa, Thomas's wife, mother to our 14-year-old daughter Lily, and permanent resident of Brookhaven, Georgia, a town where old money whispers and family names carry weight like ancient curses. Our Tudor-style home sits on Magnolia Avenue, with its manicured lawns and century-old oak trees that line the street like silent witnesses to generations of secrets. It's beautiful, the kind of place featured in Southern Living magazines. It's also the house Thomas grew up in, the one his grandfather left to him, though Nancy never let us forget it was through her bloodline that the property came into the family. "You've outdone yourself. Again, Melissa," Nancy said that evening, her perfectly manicured hand touching my shoulder as she surveyed the birthday spread I'd prepared. Though I would have used the silver serving trays. They were Thomas's father's favorites. I smiled tightly. "I know, Nancy. They're in storage. We discussed this." "Did we? Well, never mind. It's lovely anyway." She patted my cheek like I was a child and turned to greet the Hendersons, who had just arrived. That was Nancy Evans in a nutshell. 72 years old, with a posture as rigid as her principles, hair always colored the perfect shade of subtle blonde, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. She had a way of making compliments feel like criticisms, and suggestions feel like commands. I watched her work the room, commanding attention with anecdotes about Thomas's childhood. My husband, brilliant, kind, but perpetually caught between his mother's expectations and his own desires, had always been the golden child in Nancy's narrative. The successful investment banker who'd married beneath him, according to whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. Lily appeared at my side, her dark hair, so like her father's, pulled into a messy ponytail. At 14, she was already showing signs of the woman she would become. Observant, thoughtful, with a quiet strength I sometimes envied. "Dad's missing his own party," she said, picking at the sleeve of her navy blue dress, the one Nancy had bought her, insisting it was more appropriate than the outfit she'd chosen herself. "He's working, honey. You know how these business trips can be." The lie felt bitter on my tongue. Thomas had always made it home for birthdays, especially his own, until now. "Grandma says he's just avoiding turning 45, Lily said, her tone making it clear she didn't believe it either. I forced a laugh. "Your father isn't vain enough to skip his own party." Lily shrugged. "Then why isn't he answering my texts?" The question hung between us, unanswered. Because I didn't know. For 3 days, Thomas had been unreachable. His secretary at Evans Financial said he'd cleared his calendar for a last-minute trip to Chicago, but she sounded uncertain. His business partner, Richard, claimed Thomas had mentioned personal matters that needed attention, and Nancy had insisted the party go on. 45 is a milestone, she declared when I suggested postponing. "And I've already invited everyone who matters. We'll celebrate for him. He'll be sorry he missed it." The way she said it, like a threat wrapped in Southern hospitality, had sent a chill down my spine. I was cutting the cake when my phone buzzed. The message that changed everything. I must have swayed on my feet because Lily touched my arm. "Mom? What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. My fingers trembled as I tried to type back, "Thomas? Is that you?" No response. Across the room, Nancy was watching me, her head tilted slightly, eyes narrowed. I tucked my phone away, plastered on a smile, and continued serving cake as if my world hadn't just tilted on its axis. "Who wants ice cream?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. Later, after the guests had gone and Lily had retreated to her room, I stood in our kitchen staring at my phone. No more messages had come through. I tried calling the number, disconnected. "Such a lovely evening," Nancy said, startling me. She'd stayed behind, as she always did, to help clean up, which really meant inspecting how I kept Thomas's house. Though I can't help feeling Thomas would have, enjoyed the German chocolate cake more. It was always his favorite. "This is his favorite," I said automatically. 15 years of marriage had taught me that. Nancy smiled that smile again, the one that never reached her eyes. "A mother knows these things, dear." I looked at her then, really looked at her, and felt something I'd been suppressing for years. Fear. Not just the anxiety of never measuring up, but genuine fear that this woman, with her perfect pearls and immaculate reputation, was dangerous. "Nancy," I said carefully, "have you heard from Thomas today?" She busied herself with gathering dessert plates. "Not directly, no, but I'm sure he's fine. Thomas has always been independent. That's not what you said when he wanted to attend college out of state, I replied before I could stop myself. Nancy's hands stilled. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I glimpsed something cold and calculating behind her carefully applied makeup. Then it was gone, replaced by a tight smile. Ancient history, Melissa. Now, I think I'll head home. Don't forget we have that meeting with the family lawyer on Thursday. Thomas would want us to proceed as planned. What meeting? I asked, but she was already gathering her purse. About the estate adjustments. Didn't Thomas tell you? Well, I'm sure he meant to. We'll discuss it Thursday. Don't worry your pretty head about it tonight. She patted my cheek again, this time her nails digging in slightly. Get some rest. You look tired. After she left, I stood in the silence of our kitchen, the remnants of the party scattered around me, like evidence at a crime scene. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I reread the message. Don't trust your mother-in-law. For the first time in 15 years, I was starting to think that might be the best advice I'd ever received. Morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds as I sat nursing my third cup of coffee. I hadn't slept. How could I? My husband was missing. No, hiding. And the only clue I had was a cryptic warning about the woman who'd been undermining me for 15 years. Lily stumbled into the kitchen, already dressed for school in jeans and a hoodie, another outfit Nancy would disapprove of. "Mom, you look awful," she said, grabbing a granola bar from the pantry. "Thanks, honey. Just what every woman wants to hear." I tried to smile, but it felt like my face might crack from the effort. She studied me with those perceptive eyes, so like Thomas's. Is it Dad? Did something happen? I hesitated. Lily was 14, caught in that delicate space between childhood and adulthood. I'd always believed in honesty with her, but how do you tell your daughter that her father might be hiding from her grandmother? "I'm just worried about him," I said finally. "It's not like him to be out of touch for so long." Lily nodded, unconvinced. "Grandma thinks you worry too much." "Grandma thinks a lot of things," I muttered. After dropping Lily at school, I drove to Evans Financial, the investment firm Thomas had built with his college friend Richard. The modern glass building stood in downtown Brookhaven, a testament to Thomas's success and his rebellion against Nancy's expectations. She'd wanted him to take over his late father's law practice, to follow the path she'd laid out for him since birth. The receptionist, Amanda, greeted me with surprise. "Mrs. Evans, we weren't expecting you." "I wasn't expecting to be here," I replied. "Is Richard in?" Amanda's smile faltered. "He's in a meeting, but I'll wait." I settled into one of the leather chairs in the reception area, making it clear I wasn't leaving. 20 minutes later, Richard emerged from his office, looking harried. When he spotted me, his expression shifted from confusion to something like alarm. "Melissa, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" Richard Barnes had been Thomas's roommate at UGA. They'd started the firm together 10 years ago, building it from nothing into one of the most respected financial management companies in northern Georgia. He was tall, perpetually tanned from weekends on the golf course, with the easy charm of a man accustomed to handling other people's money. "I need to speak with you privately," I said, rising from the chair. He hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Come in." His office was meticulously organized, with certificates and awards lining the walls. A photo of Richard, Thomas, and their wives at last year's Christmas gala sat on his desk. Happier times when I still believed in the solidity of my marriage. "Thomas isn't in Chicago, is he?" I asked, without preamble once the door closed behind us. Richard's hesitation told me everything. "Melissa, don't lie to me, Richard. Please. I need to know where my husband is." He sank into his chair, suddenly looking tired. "He told me he needed some time away, that's all I know." "He told you? When?" "Last Friday. He said he'd be unreachable for a few days, maybe longer. I assumed you knew." "Friday, the day before he disappeared. Before he canceled our weekend plans with a text about an emergency client meeting in Chicago." "Did he say why?" I pressed. Richard shifted uncomfortably. "He mentioned some family matters. Something about the estate. I got the impression it involved his mother." My stomach twisted. "And you didn't think to check if I knew about this?" "It wasn't my place, Melissa. Thomas and I have always respected each other's privacy." I leaned forward. "Richard, I think Thomas might be in trouble. I received a strange message last night from a number I don't recognize." I showed him the text. Richard's face paled. "Jesus," he whispered. "You think this is from Thomas?" "Who else would send this? And why would he be hiding from Nancy?" Richard rubbed his face. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of family drama, but he hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Thomas has been worried about something lately. He's been reviewing all the company. Financials, asking about access to accounts, making sure everything was in his name only. A cold weight settled in my chest. When was this? The past few months, and he hesitated again. And what, Richard? He asked me about Andrew Callahan, our old college friend who's now a lawyer, specifically about his expertise in estate law and challenging power of attorney. The weight in my chest became a stone. Nancy has power of attorney over Thomas's assets? Richard looked surprised. You didn't know? It's been that way since his father died. Nancy convinced him it was simpler that way, with the family estate being so complex. I sat back, stunned. Thomas and I had separate finances. His idea, which I'd never questioned. He provided generously for our family, and I had my own. Modest savings from before we married. But I'd always assumed he controlled his inheritance, the properties, the investments that had been in his family for generations. I need to speak with Andrew Callahan, I said. Richard nodded, already reaching for his phone. I'll get you his number. And Melissa? His expression was grave. Be careful. Nancy Evans isn't someone you want as an enemy. As if I needed that warning after 15 years of subtle warfare. I left Evans Financial with Andrew Callahan's contact information and a growing sense of dread. Instead of going home, I drove to the small park where Thomas and I used to meet when we first started dating, before Nancy deemed me acceptable enough to enter the Evans home. I sat on our bench, watching ducks glide across the pond, and tried Thomas's number again, straight to voicemail. Thomas, it's me, I said after the beep. I know you're not in Chicago. I know something's wrong. Please, just tell me you're safe. Whatever is happening with Nancy, with the estate, we can figure it out together. Just call me back, please. My phone rang almost immediately after I hung up, making my heart leap. But it wasn't Thomas. It was Nancy. Melissa, dear. Her voice was honey-sweet with an undercurrent of steel. I just had the most concerning call from Richard Barnes. Something about you being upset at the office? Making a scene? I gripped the phone tighter. I wasn't making a scene, Nancy. I was looking for answers about my husband. Our Thomas has always valued his independence. You know how men can be when they feel smothered. The implication hung in the air between us. Is that why you think he's gone? Because I smothered him? My voice was steadier than I felt. Nancy sighed dramatically. I'm not saying that, dear. But Thomas has been under such pressure lately. The business, the estate matters, your expectations. Sometimes a man needs space. What estate matters, Nancy? The ones you've been handling. Without telling me? A brief silence. I see Richard has been gossiping. How disappointing. These are family matters, Melissa. Evans family matters. I am Evans family, I said through gritted teeth. By marriage, yes. Her tone made the distinction clear. Now, about Thursday's meeting with Mr. Finch. It's at 2 p.m. I've already confirmed with his office. I'm not going to any meeting without Thomas. Another pause. That would be a mistake, dear. These arrangements affect Lily's future. Surely you want what's best for your daughter. She'd always known exactly which buttons to push. What exactly are these arrangements, Nancy? Just some updates to the trust, ensuring everything is properly protected. Nothing for you to worry about. If it concerns my daughter, I'm going to worry. Nancy's voice hardened slightly. Thursday at 2 p.m., Melissa. Don't be late. She hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling trapped. Whatever game Nancy was playing, she'd been at it longer than I had. She knew all the rules, all the players. And somehow she'd convinced Thomas to run and hide rather than face whatever was happening. Or had she done something worse? The thought I'd been avoiding surfaced. What if Thomas wasn't hiding? What if he couldn't contact me? What if Nancy had... No, that was paranoia talking. Nancy was manipulative, controlling, even cruel at times, but she wouldn't harm her own son. Would she? As I sat there, wrestling with these thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, different from the one last night. Storage unit Naudu 47, Red Creek facility. Code 1528. Go alone. I sat in my car outside Red Creek storage facility for 20 minutes, gathering my courage. The place was on the outskirts of Brookhaven, a sprawling complex of identical metal units baking under the Georgia sun. I'd called Lily's school, making up a story about a doctor's appointment so I could pick her up early. She was waiting at her friend Emma's house, safely away from I. Nancy's reach. Can I help you, ma'am? The facility manager approached as I finally stepped out of my car. He was middle-aged with a name tag that read, Carl. I need to access Unit 247, I said, hoping my voice didn't betray my nerves. Carl checked his computer. That unit's registered to a Thomas Evans. My heart skipped. He's my husband. You're on the access list? Carl asked, peering at me over reading glasses. I wasn't sure, but I had to try. Yes, Melissa Evans. He nodded after checking his screen. All right then, it's in Building C, toward the back. Relief washed over me. Thomas had put me on the access list, a small but significant detail. Whatever was happening, he'd wanted me to be able to reach this place. The storage unit was at the end of a long row of identical metal doors. I punched in the code, 1528, our wedding anniversary, May 28th, and the lock clicked open. The metal door rolled up with a groan. Inside, a single bare bulb illuminated what looked like an ordinary storage space. Boxes of Christmas decorations, old furniture, Lily's childhood toys. But something felt off. This unit was too perfect, too ordinary. Thomas had always been methodical, almost obsessive about organization. This haphazard arrangement wasn't his style. I moved deeper into the unit, scanning for anything unusual. At the back, partially hidden behind an old bookcase, I spotted a small safe, the kind used for documents, not valuables. It had a digital keypad. I tried our anniversary again. Nothing. Lily's birthday. Nothing. Thomas's birthday. The safe remained locked. Then I remembered. Thomas's father had died on November 9th. Thomas always marked the day quietly, usually with a visit to the cemetery. I entered 1109. The safe clicked open. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note in Thomas's neat handwriting. For Melissa. If you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. Watch alone. Trust no one, not even my mother, especially not my mother. My hands shook as I pocketed the USB drive. What had Thomas discovered that was so dangerous he felt he needed to hide? And from his own mother? As I turned to leave, I noticed a small stack of papers that had fallen from the safe. Bank statements. I picked them up, scanning the transactions. Large withdrawals, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000, all made over the past year from an account I didn't recognize. An account in both Thomas's and Nancy's names. My phone rang, startling me. Nancy. Melissa, where are you? I stopped by the house to drop off some things for Thursday's meeting. I swallowed hard. Running errands. I'll be home soon. Well, hurry back. We have matters to discuss. Her voice was pleasant, but I detected an edge of suspicion. By the way, I tried calling Lily at school for our Wednesday lunch, but they said she'd been picked up early. Is she with you? My blood ran cold. Nancy's weekly lunch with Lily. How could I have forgotten? She wasn't feeling well, I lied. Stomach bug. She's resting at home. At home? But you just said... I had to run out for medicine, I said quickly. Listen, Nancy, I need to go. I'll call you later. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding. Nancy would know I was lying the moment she checked our empty house. I needed to get to Lily and then find somewhere safe to view whatever was on that USB drive. I locked the storage unit and hurried to my car. As I pulled out of the facility, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. It hadn't been there when I arrived. The windows were tinted, making it impossible to see who was inside. Paranoia, I told myself. But I took 3 wrong turns anyway, watching my rearview mirror until I was certain no one was following me. I picked up Lily from Emma's house, ignoring her questions about why we weren't going home. Instead, I drove to the only place I could think of where Nancy wouldn't look for us. The small motel on Interstate 85 where Thomas and I had stayed the night we eloped before telling his family about our marriage. Mom, what's going on? Lily asked as I checked us into a room under my maiden name, paying cash. Why are we here? Where's Dad? I waited until we were inside the dated but clean room before answering. Lily, I need you to trust me right now. Something's happening with your dad, with Grandma Nancy. I don't understand it. All yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. Her young face hardened with a maturity that broke my heart. Is it about the money? The arguing I heard? I stared at her. What arguing? Lily sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking much younger than her 14 years. Last month, when Grandma stayed over, I heard her and Dad fighting in his study. She kept saying he was making a mistake, that He didn't understand what he was doing. Dad said he knew exactly what he was doing and it was time to make things right. I sat beside her, my mind racing. Did you hear anything else? She nodded slowly. Grandma said, if you do this, you'll regret it. We'll all regret it. It sounded scary, like a threat. I pulled her into a hug, feeling her tremble slightly against me. It's going to be okay, I promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. I'm going to figure this out. I set up my laptop on the small desk in the corner of the room, inserted the USB drive, and waited for Lily to fall asleep watching TV before opening the files. There were dozens of documents, financial records, legal correspondence, and a video file titled simply, "Watch this first." I clicked on it, heart in my throat. Thomas's face filled the screen. He looked exhausted, worried, nothing like the confident man I'd kissed goodbye 4 days ago. Mel, he began, his voice low and urgent. If you're watching this, then things have escalated faster than I anticipated. I'm sorry for disappearing, for lying about Chicago. I needed time to gather evidence and make arrangements. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. For the past year, I've been trying to take back control of my inheritance. The properties, the investments, everything my grandfather left me. Nancy has had power of attorney since my father died. It was supposed to be temporary, until I matured enough to handle it. That was 20 years ago. Thomas's bitter laugh was unlike anything I'd heard from him before. I discovered she's been systematically draining accounts, moving assets into her name. The house on Magnolia, the vacation property in Savannah, the business investments. She's been quietly transferring everything to herself. When I confronted her, she claimed it was for estate planning purposes, to avoid taxes. He leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping even lower. But it's more than that, Mel. She's been setting up a trust that would bypass you entirely if anything happened to me. Lily would only receive her inheritance when she turned 30, and only if Nancy approved of her life choices. You would get nothing. The house, our home, it would revert to her. My stomach twisted with each revelation. I've been working with Andrew Callahan to challenge the power of attorney to reclaim what's rightfully ours. Nancy found out last week. Thomas hesitated, looking away from the camera. She threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent if I continued. Said she had a doctor who would sign the necessary papers. Said she'd tell everyone I'd had a breakdown, that I was paranoid, delusional. He looked back at the camera, his eyes hard. The woman who raised me threatened to destroy me rather than relinquish control. And the worst part? I think she might succeed. She has connections everywhere. Judges, doctors, lawyers. People who've known her for decades and trust her implicitly. So I'm hiding, gathering evidence, and making new arrangements. Andrew knows everything. The documentation is all here on this drive. Proof of the financial transfers, recordings of conversations, copies of the legal documents she tried to make me sign. Thomas's expression softened. Mel, I'm so sorry for keeping you in the dark all these years. I thought I was protecting you from family drama, from Nancy's difficult nature. I was wrong. I should have told you everything from the beginning. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. Kiss Lily for me. Tell her I love her. And Mel, be careful. Nancy is dangerous when she feels threatened. Don't confront her alone. Go to Andrew. He'll know what to do next. The video ended, leaving me staring at a black screen, my reflection showing a woman I barely recognized. Pale, shocked, afraid. But beneath the fear, something else was taking root. Anger. 15 years of subtle put-downs, of being treated like an outsider in my own family, of watching Nancy manipulate my husband and influence my daughter. 15 years of smiling through gritted teeth while Nancy Evans slowly, systematically tried to erase me from the family narrative. No more. I picked up my phone and dialed Andrew Callahan's number. Andrew Callahan agreed to meet us at his office early the next morning, before regular business. Hours. I spent a restless night in the motel, checking the door locks repeatedly, starting at every sound in the hallway. Lily slept fitfully beside me, too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to sense the danger. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't be hiding anymore. I'd face Nancy Evans head-on, but I'd do it armed with knowledge and legal protection. Andrew's law. Office occupied the top floor of a modest building in downtown Brookhaven. He greeted us at the elevator, a tall man with kind eyes and a serious demeanor. Melissa, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I wish we were meeting again under better circumstances. I'd only met Andrew a handful of times over the years at Thomas's business functions. He'd always struck me as thoughtful and reserved. Nothing like the boisterous crowd Thomas usually associated with. "This is my daughter Lily," I said, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Andrew smiled at her. "You look just like your dad did at your age. We were in Boy Scouts together, did you know that?" Lily shook her head, offering a small smile in return. "I've got a conference room set up," Andrew continued, leading us down a hallway. "And I've asked my associate, Sarah Chen, to join us. She specializes in family law and guardianship issues." The conference room was warm and inviting, with large windows overlooking the town square. Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, was already seated at the table, surrounded by folders and a laptop. "I've arranged for breakfast," Andrew said, gesturing to a spread of pastries and coffee on a side table. "And there's a waiting area with magazines and Wi-Fi if you'd prefer not to sit in on our discussion," he added to Lily. I looked at my daughter questioningly. She shook her head. "I want to stay," she said firmly. "This is about my family, too." Pride swelled in my chest at her courage. I nodded, and we took seats at the table. "I've reviewed everything Thomas sent me," Andrew began once we were settled, "including the new materials you emailed last night from the USB drive. It's concerning." "That's an understatement," Sarah commented, her fingers tapping against a legal pad. "What we're looking at is a systematic attempt to disenfranchise both you and your daughter from family assets that rightfully belong to your husband." "Can she do that?" asked. "Legally?" Andrew and Sarah exchanged glances. "The power of attorney gives her significant leverage," Andrew admitted. "But what she's doing with it may cross into illegal territory, especially the unauthorized transfers from joint accounts." "What about the threat to have Thomas declared incompetent?" I asked, lowering my voice for Lily's sake, though she was listening intently. Sarah leaned forward. "That's where things get particularly troubling. We have the recording where she makes the threat, but actually attempting to have someone falsely committed would be a criminal offense. The problem is proving intent." "So what do we do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "Thomas is still missing. The meeting with Nancy's lawyer is tomorrow. First, you absolutely do not attend that meeting," Andrew said firmly. "That's walking into a trap. Second, we file emergency motions this morning to freeze all the Evans family assets pending investigation. Third," he glanced at Lily, then back to me, "we need to find Thomas." I nodded, relieved to have a plan, but still terrified of what lay ahead. "I've tried everything I can think of, all his usual places." "What about places with emotional significance?" Sarah suggested. "Places from his childhood, maybe?" I thought about it. "There's the lake house in Blue Ridge. His grandfather taught him to fish there, but Nancy sold it years ago." "Any other properties in the family?" Andrew pressed. Lily, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "What about the hunting cabin? The one Grandma always said was too dangerous to visit?" I stared at her. "What hunting cabin?" "Dad showed me pictures once. He said his grandfather used to take him there when he was little. It's somewhere in the mountains. He said someday he'd take me there, but Grandma always said it was falling apart and unsafe." Andrew was already typing on his laptop. "Do you know where exactly?" Lily shook her head. "But I remember Dad saying it was the only place his mother wouldn't follow him, that it was the one place she hated." Andrew looked up, his expression thoughtful. "Thomas's grandfather had a hunting property near Clayton. It wasn't much, just a small cabin with some land. When I helped Thomas review his inheritance after his grandfather died, it was on the asset list. I assumed it had been sold with the other properties." "Could Nancy have kept it off the books?" I asked. "Possibly, if it was remote enough, not generating income." He trailed off, returning to his laptop. "Let me check something." While Andrew searched, Sarah outlined our legal strategy. "We'll file for an emergency injunction to prevent any further asset transfers. We'll also petition to have the power of attorney revoked based on misuse. The recordings and, financial documents should be enough to get a temporary freeze while the court investigates." "And if we find Thomas?" I asked. "Then everything gets much easier. His testimony, combined with the evidence, would be powerful. But even without him, we have enough to start fighting back." Andrew looked up from his computer. "The cabin is still in the Evans family name. Property taxes have been paid regularly, but it's listed under a holding company, Evans Heritage, LLC. According to tax records, it's located off Route 76, near Clayton." Hope flared in my chest. That's about 3 hours from here. I'm coming with you, Lily declared. I shook my head. No, honey. I need you to stay somewhere safe. I'm not a baby mom. Dad needs both of us. Lily. Mrs. Evans, Sarah interrupted gently. We could arrange for Lily to stay here at the office today. We have a secure building, and she'd be away from Nancy. But I understand her concern. Family should stick together in times like this. I hesitated, torn between protecting my daughter and respecting her desire to help her father. Finally, I nodded. We'll all go. But first, I need to get some things from the house. Is that wise? Andrew asked. Nancy might be watching the place. Probably. But I need clothes, Lily's medication, and there's a hidden safe in Thomas's study with documents we might need. I straightened my shoulders, feeling stronger than I had in days. Besides, I'm done hiding from Nancy Evans. At least let me send my associate with you, Andrew offered, for legal protection, in case Nancy is there. Agreed, and an hour later, I was pulling into our driveway on Magnolia Avenue with Sarah beside me and Lily in the back seat. Nancy's silver Mercedes was parked in front of the house. Remember, Sarah said quietly, don't volunteer any information. Don't sign anything. If she asks where you're going or where you've been, you're not obligated to answer. I nodded, my heart pounding as we approached the front door. I didn't need my key. Nancy opened it before we reached the porch. Melissa, she said, her voice sharp with fake concern. Where on earth have you been? I've been worried sick. And Lily. Her gaze shifted to my daughter, then to Sarah. Who is this? I'm Sarah Chen, Mrs. Evans's legal counsel. Sarah replied smoothly before I could speak. Nancy's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of surprise quickly masked by her social smile. Legal counsel? Goodness, Melissa, what on earth do you need a lawyer for? We're family. That's precisely why, Mrs. Evans, Sarah replied. Family matters can be so complex. Nancy's gaze hardened. Indeed they can. She turned to me. Melissa, we need to talk, privately. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my lawyer, I replied, stepping past her into the house. We're just here to collect some things. Things? What things? Where are you going? Nancy followed us inside, her voice rising slightly. This is ridiculous. If it's about Thomas, I've already told you. Mrs. Evans, Sarah interrupted. My client is not required to inform you of her whereabouts or intentions. Now, if you'll excuse us. I led Lily upstairs to pack a bag while Sarah remained downstairs, effectively blocking Nancy from following us. As I helped Lily gather her clothes and medication, I could hear Nancy's voice below, alternating between concern and indignation. This is my son's house. I have every right to know what's happening. Thomas would be appalled by this behavior. Sarah's measured responses were too quiet to make out, but they seemed to be infuriating Nancy further. We worked quickly, filling 2 duffel bags with essentials. Then I slipped into Thomas's study and locked the door behind me. The safe was hidden behind a false panel in his bookshelf, concealed by leather-bound classics his grandfather had collected. I opened it using his father's birthday. Nancy would never have guessed that combination, and removed the contents, property deeds, Thomas's will, insurance policies, and a small leather journal I'd never seen before. I stuffed everything into my bag just as a knock sounded at the door. Melissa, what are you doing in there? Nancy's voice was dangerously calm now. Just getting some of Thomas's things, I called back, scanning the room for anything else we might need. Open this door immediately. This is still my house. That was it. The final straw. 15 years of submission and polite tolerance snapped inside me. I yanked the door open, finding myself face to face with Nancy. No, it isn't your house. It's Thomas's house. And mine. And Lily's. It has never been yours, no matter how much you pretend otherwise. Nancy's eyes widened, then narrowed. You have no idea what you're talking about, or what you're doing. Actually, I think I finally do. I stepped past her, bag in hand. We're leaving now. I suggest you do the same. As I walked down the stairs, I felt lighter than I had in years. Nancy followed, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. If you leave now, you'll regret it, she called after me. The meeting tomorrow is crucial for Lily's future. If you miss it, I turned at the bottom of the stairs. Save your threats, Nancy. We know about the transfers, the trust changes, all of it. It's over. The color drained from her perfectly made-up face. Who have you been talking to? What lies has Thomas been telling you? Goodbye, Nancy. I joined Lily and Sarah at the front door. We'll be in touch through our lawyers. As we walked to the car, Nancy called out one last time, her voice shaking with either rage or fear. I couldn't tell which. You think you know what you're doing, but you don't. This family has traditions, obligations you couldn't possibly understand. Thomas knows his duty. He always comes back to where he belongs. I didn't look back as we drove away, but in the rearview mirror, I could see Nancy standing on the porch, her rigid posture finally beginning to crumble. Mom? Lily's voice was small from the back seat. Are we going to find Dad now? I nodded, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Yes, honey. We're going to find your father. And God help Nancy Evans when we did. The drive to Clayton stretched through the afternoon, the familiar city landscape giving way to rolling hills, and eventually the steep climbs of North Georgia's mountains. Lily sat quietly beside me, alternating between staring out the window and checking her phone, not for social media, but for any response from her father. I'd texted Thomas that we were coming, hoping he'd see it, hoping he was actually there. What if he's not at the cabin? Lily finally asked, voicing the fear I'd been pushing away. Then we'll keep looking, I said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. But I think he will be. The turn off Route 76 was easy to miss, a narrow gravel road marked only by a weathered wooden sign reading, Private Property. The road climbed steadily upward, winding through dense forests of oak and pine. The rental sedan I'd picked up after leaving our house, another precaution against. Nancy struggled with the steep incline. Dad brought me up here once, Lily said suddenly. When I was little, maybe 6 or 7. Grandma was in Europe for the summer. He said it was our secret adventure. I glanced at her, surprised. He never told me about that. She shrugged. He said some things needed to stay between us. I thought it was just a father-daughter thing, but now you. Think he was hiding it from Nancy? I finished for her. Lily nodded. We only stayed one night. He showed me how to fish in the stream and told stories about his grandfather. It was the happiest I'd ever seen him. My throat tightened. There was so much I didn't know about my own husband, so many parts of himself he'd kept hidden, even from me. The cabin appeared suddenly around a bend, a small, sturdy structure of weathered logs nestled in a clearing, backed by towering pines. A stream glinted through the trees behind it. It looked peaceful, isolated, exactly the kind of place someone might go to hide. More importantly, a dark blue SUV was parked beside it, the same vehicle Thomas had driven away in 4 days ago. He's here, Lily whispered, already unfastening her seatbelt before I'd fully stopped the car. Wait, I cautioned, placing a hand on her arm. Let me go first. The cabin door opened before we could get out of the car. Thomas stood in the doorway, unshaven, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt I didn't recognize. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the clearing. Then Lily was out of the car, running toward her father. He caught her in his arms, holding her tightly, his face buried in her hair. I approached more slowly, a storm of emotions. Relief, anger, love, betrayal, battling inside me. Mel, Thomas said over Lily's shoulder, his voice cracking. You found me. You left clues, I replied, stopping a few feet away. You wanted to be found. He nodded, finally releasing Lily but keeping an arm around her shoulders. But not by her. Nancy knows. Something's happening, I said. She was at the house when we went to get our things. She's scared. A grim smile touched Thomas's lips. Good. She should be. He led us inside the cabin. It was small but surprisingly comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, a basic kitchen area, 2 doors leading to what I assumed were bedrooms. A laptop and stacks of papers covered the wooden table. I've been gathering evidence, Thomas explained, gesturing to the documents. Bank records, property deeds, trust documents. Everything I could find that shows what she's been doing. We have the USB drive, I told him. And Andrew Callahan is filing emergency motions today to freeze the assets. Thomas sank into a chair, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I should have done this years ago. I should have stood up to her when we first got married. But she's my mother, and I just kept thinking. He trailed off. That she'd change, I finished. That she'd accept me. Accept us. He nodded, looking ashamed. I was a coward. No, I said firmly. You were a son who wanted his mother's approval. There's nothing wrong with that. The wrong was all hers. Lily had been examining the cabin. But now she turned back to us. What happens now? Do we stay here? Thomas and I exchanged glances. No, he said. We go back and face her, together. But first, there's something I need to show you both. He opened his laptop and pulled up a video file. I installed security cameras in my study 6 months ago, after I noticed things being moved around. I thought it was the housekeeper at first. The video showed Thomas's study from a high angle. Nancy entered, closing the door behind her. She went straight to Thomas's desk, using a key to unlock the top drawer. She removed folders, photographing the contents with her phone before replacing them exactly as she'd found them. Then she moved to the bookshelf, the same one concealing the safe. She was spying on me, Thomas said quietly, looking for evidence that I was challenging the power of attorney. Did she find the safe? I asked. Thomas shook his head. No, but she found this. He tapped a key, and the video jumped forward. Now Nancy was examining a legal document, her expression darkening as she read. She pulled out her phone and made a call. I can't make out what she's saying, I said, straining to hear the audio. You don't need to, Thomas replied, his voice hard. I know who she called. Dr. Lawrence Bishop, a psychiatrist who's been friends with the family for decades. The next day, I overheard her telling him I'd been exhibiting paranoid behavior and delusional thinking, that I needed to be evaluated, possibly committed, for my own safety. I felt sick. She was actually going to do it, have you declared. Incompetent. She would have succeeded too. Bishop has connections at Riverwood Psychiatric Facility. One phone call from him, and I could have been held for observation. Once you're in a place like that, he didn't need to finish the thought. That's when you decided to disappear, I said. Thomas nodded. I needed time to copy everything, to make arrangements. I was going to contact you once. I was sure it was safe, but then Nancy threw a birthday party, I said bitterly. A party for a man she was planning to destroy. Classic Nancy, Thomas said with a humorless laugh, keeping up appearances at all costs. But you sent me that text, I said. From a burner phone? I had to warn you. I saw on the security feed that she was going through our bedroom, our personal things. I was afraid of what she might do next. Lily, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. Why does Grandma hate us so much? What did we ever do to her? Thomas looked at his daughter, pain etched on his face. She doesn't hate you, Lily. She loves you, in her way. She needs to control everything, everyone. When I married your mother, when we had you, it meant part of me belonged to someone else. Nancy couldn't stand that. That's not love, Lily said flatly. No, Thomas agreed. It's not. We should call Andrew, I said, checking my watch. Let him know we found you. He'll want to amend the filings. While Thomas spoke with Andrew, Lily and I explored the cabin. The smaller bedroom had clearly been Lily's during that long-ago visit. A faded drawing still. Taped to the wall showed 3 stick figures labeled Dad, me, and Mom, standing in front of a triangular house with a chimney. I don't even remember drawing this, Lily said, touching the paper gently. You were very young, I replied, my heart aching for all the moments like this that Nancy had stolen from us. All the family trips that never happened because Nancy had other plans. All the holidays interrupted by her carefully timed emergencies. Thomas joined us, looking more focused than before. Andrew says we need to go back tomorrow. He's arranged for a hearing before Judge Martinez, one of the few judges in the county who isn't in Nancy's social circle. Will it be enough? I asked. The evidence? It has to be, Thomas said grimly. But there's one more thing we need to do. Tonight. He hesitated, then continued. I need to call my mother. I stared at him. Why? Because I want her to know it's over, that I'm not hiding anymore. And, his voice hardened, I want to record her reaction when I tell her. The call was placed on speakerphone with Andrew Callahan and Sarah Chen patched in remotely to witness. Thomas's hand shook slightly as he dialed, but his voice was steady when Nancy answered. Thomas? Thomas, is that you? Where are you? I've been worried sick. Hello, Mother, he said evenly. I think you know exactly where I am. What are you talking about? I've been calling hospitals. I've filed a missing persons report. Stop lying, Thomas cut in. I know everything. The transfers, the trust changes, the call to Dr. Bishop, it's over. A pause. Then, Nancy's voice changed, hardened. You're confused, Thomas. This is exactly why I've been concerned. These paranoid delusions, they're not delusions when I have proof. Video, audio, documents, all of it. And now my lawyers have it too. Lawyers? Nancy's voice rose. What lawyers? Thomas, this is family business. There's no need to involve outsiders. Melissa and Lily are my family, Thomas said, firmly. You're the outsider now, Mother. Another pause, longer this time. When Nancy spoke again, her voice was eerily calm. You don't mean that. You're upset, not thinking clearly. We can discuss this rationally at the meeting tomorrow. There will be no meeting tomorrow, not with your lawyer anyway. Instead, we'll be in Judge Martinez's courtroom, filing to revoke your power of attorney and freezing all the Evans assets pending investigation. Judge Martinez? Nancy's composure slipped. You can't. She's always been against me, against our family. She's fair, Thomas corrected, which is exactly why you've avoided her courtroom for 20 years. Thomas, listen to me. Nancy's voice took on the commanding tone I'd heard so many times. What you're doing will destroy this family. Everything your grandfather built. Everything your father protected. No, Thomas interrupted. What you've been doing is the destruction. It ends now. There was a moment of silence before Nancy spoke again, her voice now frighteningly soft. You'll regret this, Thomas. When you come to your senses, when you realize what you've thrown away, it will be too late. Is that a threat, Mother? It's a promise. From the woman who has sacrificed everything for you. The line went dead. Thomas looked up at me, his face pale but resolute. Well, that's it. No turning back now. I took his hand. There never was. That night, the three of us slept in the cabin's 2 small bedrooms, Thomas and I in one, Lily in the other. Despite the circumstances, despite the confrontation that awaited us in the morning, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. My family was together, united against the storm. Before dawn, I woke to find Thomas already up, sitting by the window, watching the first gray light filter through the trees. She won't give up easily, he said without turning. You know that, right? I joined him, resting my hand on his shoulder. I know, but neither will we. The Brookhaven, County Courthouse stood like a sentinel in the morning light, its marble columns and broad steps projecting an air of dignified authority. We arrived early, but Andrew and Sarah were already waiting for us in a small conference room off the main hallway. Judge Martinez has agreed to hear our emergency petition first thing, Andrew explained, arranging documents on the table. Nancy's lawyer, Edward Finch, tried to have the case reassigned, but the clerk refused. Finch is good, Thomas warned. He's been Mother's attack dog for decades. He's also ethically compromised, Sarah countered. We've included evidence that he helped create the fraudulent trust amendments. His participation in this hearing is a risk for him professionally. Thomas looked impressed. You've been thorough. We had to be, Andrew replied. Your mother has influence in this town, but not as much as she thinks. At exactly 9 a.m., we were called into courtroom B. Judge Elena Martinez, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun, presided from the bench. The courtroom was mostly empty except for a few clerks, our legal team, and, seated at the opposite table, Edward. Finch, a corpulent man with expensive cufflinks and a perpetual frown. Notably absent was Nancy herself. Where is she? I whispered to Thomas. He shook his head, looking concerned. I don't know. She never misses a chance to perform. Judge Martinez called the court to order. We are here on an emergency petition regarding the Evans family estate. I understand there are allegations of financial impropriety and misuse of power of attorney. She peered over her reading glasses at Finch. Mr. Finch, where is your client? Finch rose smoothly. Your Honor, Mrs. Evans sends her apologies. She was unexpectedly indisposed this morning. She has authorized me to represent her interests fully. Indisposed, Thomas muttered under his breath. That's convenient. Judge Martinez seemed to share his skepticism. Very well, let's proceed. Mr. Callahan, present your petition. Andrew stood, outlining our case methodically. The unauthorized transfers, the altered trust documents, the attempt to have Thomas declared incompetent, all of it backed by the evidence we'd gathered. As he spoke, I watched Finch's expression change from confident dismissal to growing concern. Your Honor, Andrew concluded, we are asking for 3 immediate actions. First, a temporary freeze on all Evans family assets. Second, the immediate revocation of Nancy Evans's power of attorney. And third, a full forensic accounting of all transactions made under that power in the past 5 years. Judge Martinez turned to Finch. Counselor, your response? Finch stood, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, these allegations are absurd. Mrs. Evans has managed the Evans family estate impeccably for over 20 years. These so-called unauthorized transfers were standard estate planning measures, fully documented and above board. As for the ridiculous claim that she attempted to have her own son declared incompetent, we have recorded evidence, Your Honor, Sarah interrupted, rising to her feet. Audio and video, including Mrs. Evans's conversation with Dr. Lawrence Bishop, discussing involuntary commitment procedures. Finch faltered. I have not been made aware of any such evidence. It was included in our filing, Andrew said mildly. Perhaps you should review the complete documentation more carefully, Counselor. Judge Martinez frowned. Mr. Finch, are you prepared to address the specific allegations, or do you need time to review the evidence? Finch glanced at his watch, then at the courtroom door, as if expecting Nancy to burst in at any moment. Your Honor, given the unexpected nature of some of these claims, I would request a brief recess to consult with my client. Granted. 30 minutes. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. As soon as we were back in the conference room, Thomas pulled out his phone. Something's wrong. Nancy would never miss this hearing unless what? I asked, a chill running down my spine. Thomas didn't answer. He was already dialing, his expression grim. Richard? It's Thomas. Have you seen my mother today? She was supposed to be in court, but... He paused, listening. When? Are you sure? Another pause. No, don't try to stop her. Just keep an eye on things until we get there. He hung up, his face ashen. Nancy's at Evans Financial. She showed up when they opened, demanding access to the company accounts. Richard stalled her, but she's threatening to call security if he doesn't comply. Andrew's expression turned serious. The company accounts weren't included in our emergency freeze request. Technically, with the power of attorney still in effect until the judge rules. She could drain them, Thomas finished. Everything I've built over the last decade. Gone. We need to get back to Judge Martinez, Sarah said, already gathering her notes. Amend the petition to include the business assets. There's no time, Thomas argued. By the time we get the order, it'll be too late. I touched his arm. Then we need to go there. Now. Confront her directly. Thomas hesitated, torn between the legal proceeding and the immediate threat to his company. Go, Andrew decided for us. Sarah and I will handle things here. We'll get the order expanded and follow as soon as we can. 10 minutes later, Thomas, Lily, and I were hurrying into the gleaming lobby of Evans Financial. The receptionist, Amanda, looked up with obvious relief. Oh, thank God. Mr. Evans, they're in the main conference room. Mr. Barnes asked me to send you right in. We could hear the raised voices before we reached the door. Nancy's cultured tones had escalated to something approaching a shriek. I don't care what Thomas told you. I have legal authority over these accounts, and I am instructing you to transfer the funds immediately. Richard's response was too low to make out. Thomas pushed open the door without knocking. The conference room fell silent. Nancy stood at the head of the table, immaculately dressed in a powder blue suit, her hair and makeup flawless as always. But her eyes held a wild, desperate look I'd never seen before. Richard sat across from her, along with 2 other board members and a nervous-looking young man I recognized as the company's CFO. Mother, Thomas said quietly, step away from the table. Nancy's face underwent a rapid series of transformations. Shock, anger, calculation, and finally, a brittle attempt at maternal concern. Thomas, thank God you're safe. I've been out of my mind with worry. Where have you been? Are you all right? She started toward him, arms outstretched as if for an embrace. Thomas didn't move. It's over, Mother. The hearing is happening right now. Judge Martinez is reviewing the evidence as we speak. Nancy stopped, her arms slowly lowering. Evidence? What evidence? Thomas, I don't know what these people have been telling you, but... Stop. Thomas's voice was like a whip crack. No more lies, no more manipulation. I know. Everything. The transfers, the trust changes, all of it. For a moment, Nancy seemed to deflate. Then her gaze shifted to me, and her eyes hardened. You, she hissed. You turned my son against me. You were never good enough for him. Never worthy of the Evans name. Some little nobody from nowhere, latching onto my son for his money, his position. That's enough, Thomas thundered, stepping between us. Melissa has been nothing but patient and respectful to you for 15 years. She gave up her career to raise our daughter, to build the home you've tried repeatedly to undermine. If anyone here is unworthy of respect, it's you." Nancy recoiled as if slapped. "How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I've sacrificed for you?" "What sacrifices, Mother? Tell me. Was it a sacrifice to maintain control of my inheritance long after I became an adult? Was it a sacrifice to interfere in my marriage, my parenting, my business? Or was it a sacrifice to try to have me committed when I finally stood up to you?" Nancy's face had gone white, but her eyes burned with a cold fury. "You wouldn't understand. This family, this legacy, it's larger than any of us. I've only ever tried to protect what generations of Evans men built." "No," Thomas said softly. "You tried to steal it, and now you've lost it. And me. Forever." Nancy's gaze swept over all of us. Thomas, me, Lily, the board members watching in stunned silence. Whatever she saw in our faces seemed to finalize something in her mind. She straightened her shoulders, adjusting her perfect suit jacket. "This isn't over," she said, her voice once again the controlled, cultured tone I knew so well. "Not by a long shot." She gathered her purse and turned to leave, her dignity seemingly intact. But as she passed Lily, my daughter spoke up for the first time. "I know what you said on the phone that night," Lily said, her young voice steady. "About keeping Dad quiet until everything was settled. I heard you." Nancy froze, then turned slowly to face her granddaughter. For once, she seemed to have no ready response, no smooth lie or deflection. "You would have hurt him," Lily continued, her voice catching slightly. "Your own son, my dad. How could you do that?" Something flickered in Nancy's eyes, regret, perhaps, or simply the recognition that her perfect facade had finally, irrevocably cracked. Without answering, she turned and walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking a sharp, diminishing rhythm down the hallway. The silence she left behind was profound. Richard was the first to speak. "Thomas, what the hell just happened?" Thomas sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "The end of an era, I think." He glanced at the CFO. "Jeremy, I need you to lock down all the company accounts immediately. Change the authorization protocols. My mother is to have no access whatsoever." Jeremy nodded, already reaching for his laptop. Richard leaned forward. "Is it true? Was she really going to have you committed?" Thomas nodded grimly. "And more. But it's over now." He reached for my hand, then put his other arm around Lily's shoulders. "We're going to be okay." My phone buzzed. With a text from Sarah. "Judge granted everything. Full asset freeze in place. Power of attorney revoked. Coming to you now with the order." I showed it to Thomas, who closed his eyes briefly in relief. Good, that's good. But I could see the pain beneath his relief, the hurt of a son betrayed by the one person who should have loved him unconditionally. I squeezed his hand. "Let's go home," I said, softly. "Our home." Thomas nodded, rising to his feet. "Yes, let's go home." As we left Evans Financial, I spotted Nancy's silver Mercedes still in the parking lot. She sat behind the wheel, staring straight ahead, not acknowledging us as we passed. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity for this proud, lonely woman who had sacrificed love for control, family for power. But then I remembered all. She had done all she had been willing to do, and the pity faded. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. And some people, I realized, would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. The days following the courtroom confrontation passed in a blur of legal meetings, financial reviews, and emotional reckonings. Thomas threw himself into untangling the web Nancy had woven through the family. Assets, working closely with Andrew and a team of forensic accountants to trace every transfer, every manipulation. What they uncovered was more extensive than any of us had imagined. For nearly 20 years, Nancy had been systematically moving assets, creating shell companies, and establishing trusts that gave her ultimate control over the Evans fortune. Thomas's inheritance, properties, investments, heirlooms, had been quietly shifted into entities where his ownership was reduced to mere beneficiary status, always subject to Nancy's approval. She was thorough, Andrew admitted during one particularly grueling session at our dining room table, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. "I've never seen anything quite like it. Every move was technically legal, though ethically dubious. She exploited loopholes, used corporate structures to conceal ownership. It's the kind of financial engineering that would impress Wall Street." Thomas rubbed his tired eyes. "She always was brilliant, just misdirected." We hadn't seen or heard from Nancy since that day at Evans Financial. She'd retreated to her immaculate colonial home on the other side of Brookhaven, communicating only through Edward Finch, who had become notably more cooperative since Judge Martinez's ruling. She wants to negotiate, Finch had told Andrew during a conference call. Some kind of settlement that preserves her dignity and lifestyle. Her dignity? Thomas had laughed bitterly. What about mine? What about my family's? In the end, though, Thomas agreed to ensure Nancy wouldn't be left destitute. Not for her sake, he explained to me late one night as we lay in bed, finally alone after Lily had gone to sleep. For mine. I won't become her. Vindictive, obsessed with control. She'll have enough to live comfortably, but that's it. The power is gone. I traced the lines of worry that had deepened on his face over the past weeks. You're nothing like her, Thomas. You never could be. He caught my hand, pressing it against his cheek. I let this happen, Mel. I knew what she was like, and I still let her into our lives, let her influence Lily, let her undermine you for years. You were trying to keep the peace, I said softly, trying to be a good son. And a terrible husband, he added, his voice thick with regret. I shook my head firmly. No, never that. You protected us the best way you knew how. By hiding things from you? By pretending everything was fine when it wasn't? I sat up, needing him to understand. You grew up with her, Thomas. She shaped your reality. Of course you couldn't see clearly. She made sure of that. The important thing is that when it mattered, when she threatened everything, you chose us. You chose our family. He pulled me close, and I felt the dampness of tears against my hair. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you and Lily, he whispered. I promise. The next morning, Lily announced she wanted to visit Nancy. Absolutely not, Thomas said immediately, looking up from his coffee. Lily, stubborn as only a 14-year-old could be, crossed her arms. I need to talk to her. There are things I want to say. Lily, after everything she's done, Thomas began. That's why I need to go, Lily interrupted. I need her to know how I feel, how she made me feel all these years. I studied my daughter, seeing the determination in her eyes. So like her father's, yet there was something else there too, a clarity, a wisdom beyond her years. I'll go with her, I offered, surprising myself as much as Thomas. We'll be fine. Thomas looked between us, clearly torn. I don't trust her not to manipulate you both. Lily smiled slightly. Dad, I've been watching her manipulate people my whole life. I know all her tricks. After more discussion, Thomas reluctantly agreed, though he insisted on driving us to Nancy's house and waiting outside. The first sign of trouble, you call me, he said as we pulled up to the stately colonial with its perfect garden and gleaming white columns. Nancy answered the door herself, looking momentarily startled to see us standing on her porch. She'd aged, somehow, in the weeks since the confrontation. The perfectly coiffed hair was still in place, the designer outfit impeccable, but there was a frailty to her that hadn't been there before. Lily, she said, her voice softening. And, Melissa, this is unexpected. May we come in? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Nancy hesitated, then stepped back, gesturing us inside. The house was as I remembered it, tastefully decorated, meticulously clean, with not a single item out of place. A mausoleum to perfect appearances. We sat in the formal living room, the same room where Nancy had once told me, during our first meeting, that I would never quite fit with the Evans family traditions. Would you like some tea? Nancy offered, already reaching for the bell to summon her housekeeper. No, thank you, Lily replied before I could. We won't be staying long. Nancy's hand dropped back to her lap. I see. Then to what do I owe this visit? Lily straightened her shoulders. I wanted to ask you something, Grandma. Something I've been wondering for a long time. Nancy inclined her head slightly, her expression guarded but attentive. Did you ever really love us? Lily asked. Me or Dad or Mom? Or were we just possessions to you? Things you needed to control? The bluntness of the question seemed to shock Nancy. She blinked rapidly, her perfect composure slipping. Lily, of course I love you. You're my only grandchild. My son's daughter. Everything I did was to protect our family legacy, to ensure your future. By hurting my dad? Lily pressed. By trying to take away our home? By making my mom feel like she didn't belong? Nancy's gaze flicked to me, then back to Lily. You're too young to understand the complexities. I understand more than you think, Lily interrupted. I understand that love doesn't hurt. people. It doesn't try to control them or make them feel small. Nancy's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her already perfect skirt. I may have overstepped in some areas, but my intentions were selfish, Lily finished for her, and cruel. I placed a gentle hand on Lily's arm, not to silence her, but to support her. She had every right to speak her truth. Nancy's face hardened. I see. Thomas has thoroughly poisoned you against me. Dad never said a bad word about you, Lily replied. Not once. He always made excuses for you, always insisted we respect you. It was your actions that showed me who you really are. Something flickered in Nancy's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or the first glimmer of genuine self-reflection. Why are you really here? She asked, her voice suddenly tired. To tell me what a monster I am. I've already lost everything that matters. My son, my position, my legacy. We're here, I said, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down, because Lily needed closure, and because, despite everything, you're still her grandmother and Thomas's mother. Nancy looked at me searchingly. And you, Melissa? What do you need? The question caught me off guard. In 15 years, Nancy had never once asked what I needed or wanted. I need you to understand something, I said finally. Thomas still loves you. Even after everything, there's a part of him that always will. You're his mother, but he can't have you in his life, in our lives, unless something fundamental changes. And what would that be? Nancy asked, an edge returning to her voice. Respect, I said simply. For him, for me, for the family we've built. Not control, not manipulation, not perfect appearances, just genuine respect. Nancy was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving between us. Then she smiled faintly, not her usual calculating smile, but something sadder, more genuine. You know, Melissa, I was wrong about one thing. You do fit the Evans family. Better than I ever did. She turned to Lily. Your mother has more strength and dignity than I gave her credit for. You would do well to learn from her, not me. It was as close to an apology as we were likely to get. Lily nodded, seeming to understand the significance of the moment. We should go, I said, rising from the uncomfortable antique chair. Thomas is waiting. Nancy stood as well. Will I see you again? Either of you? Lily looked to me, uncertain. I chose my words carefully. That depends on you, Nancy. On whether you're willing to build something new instead of trying to reclaim what's gone. As we walked to the door, Nancy called after us. Lily, the drawing you made when you were 6, the one of the cabin by the lake. I still have it. Your father gave it to me after your trip there. It's the only thing on my refrigerator. Lily paused, surprised. You kept it? All this time? Nancy nodded, a hint of vulnerability in her expression. Some things are worth preserving exactly as they are. As we left the imposing house, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The war with Nancy Evans wasn't over, might never truly be over, but a truce of sorts had been established. An understanding. Do you think she'll ever change? Lily asked as we walked back to the car where Thomas waited. People rarely change completely, I replied honestly. But sometimes they can learn, grow. Your grandmother has lost everything that defined her. That kind of loss can break a person. Or remake them. Lily nodded thoughtfully. I hope she chooses to be remade. As we approached the car, Thomas rolled down the window, his expression anxious. Everything okay? I smiled reassuringly. Yes, everything's okay. For the first time in years, I truly believed it might be. Spring arrived in Brookhaven with an explosion of dogwood blossoms and azaleas, transforming the town into a riot of pink and white. Our house on Magnolia Avenue, now legally and firmly in Thomas's name alone, seemed to shed its own. Winter, as we repainted rooms, rearranged furniture, and gradually erased the subtle imprint Nancy had left on our home. What do you think about this color for the study? Thomas asked one Saturday morning, holding up a paint sample in a rich, warm blue. Too bold? I considered it, trying to imagine the formal, dark-paneled room transformed. I like it. It's nothing like what your mother would choose. Thomas grinned. Exactly why I picked it. The study had become a symbol of sorts. The room where Nancy had spied on Thomas, where secrets had been kept, where control had been maintained through paperwork and legal maneuvering. Now we were reclaiming it, turning it into a bright, welcoming space for the whole family. Lily, passing by with her friend Emma, glanced at the color. It's the same blue as the lake at the cabin, she observed. Thomas looked surprised, then nodded. You're right. I hadn't realized. We'd been back to the cabin twice since that fateful day. Once to properly close it up, and once for a weekend getaway. Just the three of us. Thomas had talked about selling it initially, its connection to his grandfather tainted by Nancy's manipulations. But Lily had protested. It's the one place that was always just ours, she'd argued. Grandma never went there, never controlled it. Can't we keep it? So we had, making plans to renovate it that summer, to create new memories untouched by the past. The legal proceedings continued, but at a more measured pace. The forensic accounting had revealed the full extent of Nancy's financial maneuvering, and the courts were methodically unwinding her complex web of trusts and holding companies. Thomas had kept his word about providing for her, a modest but comfortable allowance, the house she'd lived in for decades, and a small portfolio of investments that remained under her sole control. It's more than fair, Andrew had assured us when Thomas questioned whether he was being too generous. And strategically smart. It shows the court you're acting in good faith, not seeking revenge. Revenge had never been Thomas's goal, only justice and protection for our family. Still, the damage Nancy had done couldn't be erased overnight, especially the emotional wounds. Thomas had started seeing Dr. Mitchell, a therapist specializing in family trauma. At first reluctantly, then with growing commitment as he began to understand the patterns of manipulation and control that had shaped his childhood and continued into his adult life. She made me believe I couldn't survive without her, he told me after one particularly difficult session. That I wasn't capable of managing my own life, my own inheritance, and I believed her for so long. Why did I believe her, Mel? Because she was your mother, I said simply. Because children are wired to trust their parents, to seek their approval. It's not your fault, Thomas. Healing came in small moments, in quiet victories. The day Thomas declined a lunch invitation from his mother without feeling guilty afterward. The evening Lily showed us a college brochure for UCLA, clear across the country from Brookhaven and Nancy, and Thomas simply asked what program she was interested in, with no mention of family traditions or staying close to home. Our marriage strengthened too, built on a new foundation of complete honesty. No more secrets, no more subjects too difficult to discuss. We talked about everything. Our fears, our hopes, the years of subtle undermining we'd endured. I should have stood up for you more, Thomas said one night as we sat on our back porch, watching fireflies rise from the garden. All those times she made those little comments, those subtle digs at you. I heard them, but I just let them go. We both did, I admitted. I thought keeping the peace was more important than standing my ground. I was wrong too. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. No more peace at any price. No, more, I agreed. Nancy remained on the periphery of our lives, neither fully estranged nor truly reconciled. She sent cards for birthdays and holidays. She made cautious inquiries about Lily's school activities. She never asked to visit, and we never invited her. Until the day Lily came home from school with news about her upcoming piano recital. I thought maybe we could invite Grandma, she said, casually over dinner, not looking up from her plate. If that's okay. Thomas and I exchanged glances. Are you sure, honey? I asked carefully. You don't have to do that if you're not comfortable. Lily shrugged. She's not all bad, you know? Just broken in some ways. And she does love music. It was true. Nancy's love of classical music was perhaps the one passion she'd passed to Thomas that hadn't been tainted by control or manipulation. She'd paid for his piano lessons as a child, attended every recital without criticism, only genuine pride. If you want to invite her, you can, Thomas said after a moment. It's your recital. And so, on a warm May evening, Nancy Evans sat in the Brookhaven Academy auditorium, 3 rows behind us, elegant as always in a simple navy dress, watching. Her granddaughter played Debussy with surprising emotion and skill. She didn't approach us afterward, merely nodded from a distance, a small, tentative smile on her lips when Lily looked her way. It was a beginning of sorts. Not of reconciliation, exactly, but of a new kind of relationship. One with boundaries, with respect, with the understanding that trust, once broken, must be earned back slowly, if at all. The news came in early June, as we were finalizing plans for a summer vacation, our first real family trip in years, unplanned by Nancy, uninhibited by her expectations. "She's selling the house," Thomas said, looking up from his phone with an expression of disbelief. "Mother's selling the Colonial and moving to Charleston." "Charleston?" I repeated, surprised. "Why there?" "Her sister. Lives there, my Aunt Margaret. They haven't been close in years, not since Margaret married beneath her station, as Mother put it, but apparently they've reconnected." I remembered Margaret vaguely from our wedding, a warmer, softer version of Nancy, with genuine smiles and a fondness for unsuitable hats. She'd married an artist, much to Nancy's horror, and been gradually excluded from Evans' family events. "Is she okay?" I asked, unsure how I felt about this news. Thomas nodded slowly. "I think so. She said she wants a fresh start, somewhere she's not Nancy Evans, the Evans family matriarch, but just Nancy, Margaret's sister." He set down his phone. "She asked if we'd help her sort through things before the move. Said there are family items that should stay with us." I hesitated. "Do you want to?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me says it's a trap, another manipulation. But another part hopes it's genuine, that she's finally letting go." In the end, we decided to go, all three of us, together. The Colonial looked the same from the outside, but inside, change was evident. Boxes stood in the hallway. Spaces on the walls showed where paintings had been removed. The formal perfection was giving way to transition, to endings and beginnings. Nancy greeted us in the foyer, looking smaller somehow in casual slacks and a simple blouse, an outfit I'd never seen her wear before. "Thank you for coming," she said, her usual commanding tone replaced by something quieter. "There's quite a bit to go through, I'm afraid." We spent the afternoon sorting through generations of Evans family possessions. Nancy was surprisingly practical about most items, designating many for donation or sale. But she insisted certain pieces remain with Thomas. His grandfather's pocket watch, his father's law school diploma, photo albums dating back 3 generations. "These belong with you," she said, handing Thomas a heavy ring of keys. "The keys to everything. The safe, deposit boxes, the storage units, what's left of the properties. I've had them too long." Thomas accepted them silently, the weight of more than metal passing between mother and son. While Thomas sorted through his father's study, I helped Nancy in the sitting room, carefully wrapping crystal figurines she'd decided to keep. "You've done well with him," she said suddenly, breaking the careful silence between us. "Better than I did." I looked up, startled by the admission. "You gave him what I never could," Nancy continued, not meeting my eyes as she wrapped another figurine. "Freedom to be himself, to make mistakes, to live without constant fear of disappointment. He's a good man," I said simply. "He always was." Nancy nodded. "Yes, despite me, not because of me." She set down the wrapped crystal. "I don't expect forgiveness, Melissa. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I recognize the damage I've done. To Thomas, to you, even to Lily." It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But from Nancy Evans, this acknowledgement was monumental. "People can change," I said carefully, "if they want to badly enough. At 72? Nancy smiled faintly. "Perhaps not change, but adapt, learn, try to do less harm." She straightened, some of her old dignity reasserting itself. "I've booked a table at the Magnolia Room for dinner. I thought, perhaps we could all go, as a farewell." I hesitated, then nodded. "I'll ask Thomas and Lily." To my surprise, they both agreed. And so we found ourselves seated at Nancy's favorite restaurant, the 4 of us together for the first time in months, navigating a new and fragile dynamic. The conversation was stilted at first, carefully avoiding any mention of the legal proceedings, the financial untangling, the months of estrangement. But gradually, carefully, we found safer ground. Lily's music, Thomas's business developments, neutral memories from the past. As dessert arrived, Nancy raised her water glass. "To new beginnings," she said, looking at each of us in turn, "and to the Evans family, whatever form it takes." We clinked glasses, the simple gesture carrying weight beyond the words spoken. Later, as we said goodbye outside the restaurant, Nancy hesitated, then reached out to touch Thomas's arm, not controlling, just connecting. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "Not for what you've achieved or acquired, but for who you are, the man, the husband, the father. I should have told you that long ago." Thomas stiffened, then slowly relaxed. "Thank you, Mother." It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't reconciliation, wasn't happily ever after, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a breath of possibility. As we drove home along Magnolia Avenue, the streetlights casting dappled shadows through the ancient oaks, Lily spoke from the back seat. "Do you think Grandma will be okay? In Charleston?" Thomas glanced at me before answering. "I think she might be. She's starting over in her way. That takes courage." "Even if you don't like her much," Lily observed, "you have to admit she's strong." I smiled at my wise, perceptive daughter. "Yes, and so are we." Thomas reached across the console to take my hand. Stronger together than apart. And in that moment, driving through the warm Georgia night, I knew it was true. We had weathered the storm, faced the darkest manipulation, and emerged intact. Not unscathed, but unbroken. The Evans family would continue, but on our terms now. Our truth, our love, our strength. The strength that had been there all along, waiting to be claimed. 3 years passed, each season bringing its own healing and growth to our family. Lily graduated high school with honors and set off for UCLA, her independence blossoming far from Brookhaven's small-town scrutiny. Thomas rebuilt Evans Financial into something truly his own, implementing ethical policies that sometimes reduced profits but always preserved integrity. And I found my way back to my own career, launching a marketing consultancy that specialized in helping women entrepreneurs, work that filled me with purpose and pride. Nancy remained in Charleston, her communications with us cautious but consistent. Christmas cards, birthday calls, occasional emails asking about Lily's college experience. The careful distance seemed to serve everyone well, close enough for civility, far enough to maintain boundaries. Until the call came on a crisp October morning. "Thomas Evans," my husband answered, his voice warm with the confidence he'd found since breaking free from Nancy's control. Then his expression changed, grew serious. "Yes, this is he. I understand. How serious is it?" I set down my coffee mug, watching his face carefully. "I see. Yes, of course. We'll be there as soon as possible. Thank, you for calling." He hung up, meeting my questioning gaze. That was Margaret, Mother's sister. "Nancy's had a stroke. It's serious." Within hours, we were on the road to Charleston, the familiar landscape of Georgia giving way to the South Carolina Lowcountry. Thomas drove in silence for much of the journey, his thoughts clearly far away. "Are you okay?" I asked as we crossed the Arthur Ravenel Bridge into Charleston, the city spreading before us like a jewel box of historic buildings and swaying palms. "I don't know," he admitted. "I thought I'd made peace with everything, but now, I'm not sure what I'm feeling." "That's natural," I said, touching his arm gently. "She's still your mother." Margaret met us at the hospital, a softer, grayer version of Nancy, with kind eyes and worry, lines etched deeply around her mouth. She embraced Thomas with genuine warmth. "She's been asking for you," Margaret said, leading us through sterile corridors to the ICU. "The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical." Nancy lay pale and diminished against the white hospital sheets, monitors beeping steadily beside her. Her perfectly styled hair was gone, replaced by thin white strands that made her look older, frailer than her 75 years. "Thomas," she whispered when she saw him, her voice slurred from the stroke. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied, moving to her bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've had a stroke," she said, a flash of her old dry wit breaking through. Her gaze shifted to me. "Melissa, thank you for bringing him." "He brought himself," corrected gently. "We both wanted to come." Nancy's eyes filled with tears, something I'd never seen in all the years I'd known her. "I don't deserve it. After everything." Thomas took her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "We're family, whatever that means now." Nancy closed her eyes briefly, then looked at Thomas with unexpected urgency. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." "Mother, you should rest." "No," she interrupted, her grip tightening on his hand. "I might not have another chance. Please, Thomas. I need to make this right." Margaret stepped forward. "Nancy, are you sure? Now?" Nancy nodded weakly. "It's time for the truth. All of it." Thomas and I exchanged glances, uncertain what new revelation could possibly emerge after everything we'd uncovered. "In my apartment," Nancy began, her words slow but determined. "There's a safety deposit box key in the black lacquer jewelry case on my dresser. Box 247 at First Carolina Bank. The papers inside. They explain everything. Explain what? Thomas asked. Nancy's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Why I became the person I did. Why I held on so tight. The real reason your father died. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of the monitors. Thomas stared at his mother, confusion and concern warring on his face. Dad had a heart attack, he said slowly. He was under stress from work. He was under stress because he discovered the truth, Nancy interrupted. About the Evans fortune. About where it really came from. Margaret made a small sound of distress. Nancy, please, no more secrets, Nancy insisted, her voice stronger suddenly. No more lies. She turned back to Thomas. Your grandfather didn't build the family wealth through smart investments like we always told you. He stole it. From his business partner. A man named James Caldwell. Thomas shook his head, disbelieving. That's not possible. Grandfather was respected throughout. Georgia. His name is on buildings, scholarships. Built on stolen ideas and embezzled funds, Nancy said bitterly. When James threatened to expose him, your grandfather arranged an accident. James died, his family was paid off and silenced, and the Evans legacy was secured, but built on a terrible crime. I watched Thomas's face as he processed this revelation, saw the shock giving way to a deeper understanding. Dad found out, he said slowly. That's why he was acting so strangely those last months before he died. Nancy nodded, tears now flowing freely. He wanted to make it right. Return what was left to the Caldwell heirs, publicly acknowledge what had happened. I begged him not to. We fought bitterly about it. The night he died, her voice broke. We'd had the worst argument. Of our marriage. The doctors said stress contributed to the heart attack. It was my fault, Thomas. I killed him with my determination to protect a corrupt legacy. The confession hung in the air between them. Decades of guilt and secrets finally exposed. After he died, Nancy continued, I was terrified you'd discover the truth too. That's why I maintained control of everything. Why I couldn't let you take full ownership. I wasn't just protecting our name and fortune. I was hiding our shame. Thomas sat heavily in the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand but looking as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. All these years, he said quietly. All the manipulation, the control. It was to hide this? At first, Nancy admitted. Then it became a way of life. Power becomes its own addiction. I couldn't let go, even when the original reason faded. I became someone I never meant to be. Margaret stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder. The papers in the safety deposit box include the original documents, the payoff agreements, everything. Nancy's been gathering the evidence for years, trying to find the courage to face it. And the Caldwells? I asked. Are there still heirs? Nancy nodded weakly. A granddaughter, living in Seattle. Her name and information are in the box, too. I've been tracking the family for decades. Thomas looked utterly lost, the foundations of his identity shaken once again. Why tell me now? Why not take this to your grave? Nancy's gaze held his, steady despite her weakened state. Because you deserve to know. Because I've watched you rebuild your life with honesty and integrity. Because, her voice caught, because I want to die with a clean conscience, if such a thing is still possible for me. The monitors beeped in the silence that followed, marking the passage of time as Thomas absorbed this final, devastating truth about his family. What do you want me to do with this information? He finally asked. Whatever you think is right, Nancy replied. I trust your judgment, Thomas. I should have trusted it long ago. The simple statement, I trust your judgment, carried more weight than any apology could have. It was the one thing Nancy had never given him. Genuine faith in his ability to make his own decisions. I'll need time, Thomas said after a long moment, to process this, to decide. Nancy nodded, exhaustion clearly overtaking her. Take all the time you need. The truth has waited this long. It can wait a little longer. As she drifted into sleep, Thomas and I stepped out into the hallway, where he leaned heavily against the wall, running his hands through his hair. All this time, he murmured. Everything we built, everything we fought for, built on a crime, on stolen lives. I took his hands in mine. This doesn't change who you are, Thomas. What you've done with your life, your business, our family, that's still real, still yours. He looked at me, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since those early days after Nancy's manipulation had been exposed. What would you do? If you were me? I considered the question carefully. I think I'd want to know the whole truth. First, read those papers, find this Caldwell granddaughter, then decide whether some kind of restitution is possible, not to erase the past, but to create a better future. Thomas nodded slowly. Together? You'll help me with this? Always, I promised. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As we stood there in the sterile hospital hallway, I realized that Nancy's final revelation, painful as it was, had also been her final gift to us. The truth, at last. The chance to build something new on honest ground. The legacy of the Evans family would never be the same, but perhaps it could become something better. The rain fell in gentle sheets across Brookhaven as we gathered on the front steps of the newly renovated community center. Thomas stood at the podium, calm and collected, despite the weight of the moment. Beside him sat an elegant woman in her 50s, Claire Caldwell, granddaughter of James Caldwell, flown in from Seattle for this occasion. I sat in the front row with Lily, home from college for the summer, and Margaret, who had become a surprising ally and friend in the months since Nancy's stroke. Nancy herself was absent, still recovering in Charleston, too frail to travel but watching via live stream that Margaret had arranged. Thank you all for coming today, Thomas began, his voice strong despite the emotion I could see in his eyes. This community center has always carried my grandfather's name, Robert Evans Community Center, honoring his supposed philanthropy and civic leadership. Today, we're here to correct a historical wrong and acknowledge a painful truth. The crowd, mostly Brookhaven residents curious about the sudden name change, listened attentively as Thomas recounted the story that had been hidden for over 50 years. How Robert Evans had stolen not just money, but revolutionary medical research from his business partner, James Caldwell. How he'd arranged the car accident that killed James when he threatened exposure. How the Evans' fortune had been built on this terrible foundation. My grandfather's crime robbed the world of more than just one man's life and ideas, Thomas continued. James Caldwell's research into cardiac treatments might have saved countless lives, including, ironically, my own father's. The true cost of this theft can never be calculated. He turned to Claire Caldwell, who rose to stand beside him. No. Apology can undo what happened, but acknowledgement is the first step toward healing. That's why, effective today, this building will be renamed the Caldwell Evans Community Center, and the newly established Caldwell Innovation Fund, endowed with $20 million from the Evans Family Trust, will support medical researchers who might otherwise struggle to find funding for their work. Claire stepped to the microphone, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. When Mr. Evans contacted me 6 months ago with this story, I thought it was some kind of bizarre scam. My family had long ago stopped speaking about great-grandfather James and his lost research. It was a family mystery, a whispered tragedy. She paused, looking out at the crowd. The truth Thomas Evans has brought to light doesn't restore what was lost, but his commitment to making amends, to creating something positive from this dark history, honors my great-grandfather's memory in a way I never thought possible. The Caldwell Innovation Fund will ensure that other medical researchers won't face the barriers or dangers that James Caldwell did. The ceremony continued with the unveiling of the new sign and a community reception, but my focus remained on Thomas, on the quiet dignity with which he shouldered this burden of truth, on the path of redemption he had chosen not just for himself, but for generations of his family. The journey to this day had not been easy. After Nancy's revelation, Thomas had spent weeks immersed in the documents from the safety deposit box, piecing together the complete history of his grandfather's crime and its devastating ripple effects. The evidence was irrefutable. Detailed records kept by Robert Evans himself, perhaps as insurance, perhaps out of some twisted pride in his own ruthlessness. Finding Claire Caldwell had been surprisingly straightforward. Approaching her with such a story had been anything but. What if she hates us? Thomas had worried the night before their first meeting. What if she wants to expose everything, destroy Evans' financial, take everything we have? Then we'll face it, I'd told him. The truth is already out there now. We just have to decide what to do with it. But Claire had proven to be remarkable, thoughtful, measured, more interested in acknowledgement than vengeance. In her, Thomas had found not an enemy, but an unexpected ally in the work of redemption. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the rain gentled to a mist, Claire approached us where we stood with Lily. "Your father would be proud," she said to Thomas. "Making this right after all these years, it takes extraordinary courage." Thomas shook his head. "I wish he'd had the chance to do it himself. He tried, at the end, and paid a terrible price," Claire acknowledged. "As did your mother, in her way." The mention of Nancy hung between us. Her stroke had left her permanently weakened, though her mind remained sharp. The woman who had once ruled the Evans family with manipulative precision now needed assistance with basic daily tasks, a cruel irony that had softened even my feelings toward her. "How is she?" Claire asked, as nigh, if reading my thoughts. "Stable," Thomas replied. "Better, in some ways. The burden of this secret, it aged her, I think, carrying it alone all those years." Claire nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to meet her someday if she's willing. Not for confrontation, but closure, perhaps, for both families." "I think she'd like that," Thomas said. As Claire moved away to speak with other attendees, Lily slipped her arm through mine. "It's strange," she said, watching the crowd. 3 years ago, we were fighting to keep what we thought was rightfully ours. Now Dad's giving away millions to make amends for something Grandfather did before he was even born." "Not giving away," I corrected gently. "Investing in something better, something honest." "Like redemption," Lily said thoughtfully. "Exactly. Like that." The event wound down as evening approached. Thomas spoke briefly with reporters from the local paper, giving a carefully prepared statement about family legacy and community responsibility. We'd decided together how much of the story to make public, enough for truth and acknowledgement, but preserving certain details out of respect for both families. Later that night, back home on 19 Magnolia Avenue, Thomas and I sat on the porch swing, listening to the rain patter on the roof. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of secrets had been a physical presence we'd grown accustomed to carrying. "I spoke with Mother after the ceremony," Thomas said, his fingers laced with mine. Margaret held up the phone so she could see the live stream. "How did she take it?" He smiled faintly. "She cried. I've seen my mother cry more in the past 6 months than in my entire life before that. She said it was beautifully handled." "High praise from Nancy Evans," I observed. "The highest." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "She asked if we might visit next month. All of us, including Lily." I considered this. "What do you think?" "I think I'd like that. Not to forget or excuse everything that happened, but to move forward. If that's possible." "It's possible," I said. "We're living proof of that." Thomas turned to face me, his expression earnest in the dim porch light. "Thank you, Mel, for everything. For standing by me through all of this, Nancy's manipulation, the legal battles, this Caldwell revelation, for helping me find a path through it. All. That's what family does," I said simply. "The real kind, anyway." He smiled, the shadows that had haunted him for so long finally lifting from his eyes. "You know, when all this started, that night at my birthday party when you got the text, I thought our lives were falling apart. But looking back now, that was actually the beginning of something better. The start of the truth. The truth isn't always easy," I said. "No," he agreed, "but it's always worth it in the end." We sat in comfortable silence as the rain continued its gentle rhythm. In the morning, Thomas would return to Evans Financial, where the company's new ethical investment policies had attracted surprising attention and respect throughout the industry. Lily would meet with her UCLA advisors via video call to discuss her summer research project. I would work with a women's business cooperative I'd helped establish in downtown Brookhaven. Life would continue, changed, challenged, but ultimately strengthened by the storms we'd weathered together. The text message that had started it all, "Don't trust your mother-in-law," had led us down a path none of us could have anticipated. Nancy's manipulation had been exposed, but so had deeper, older secrets that had shaped generations of both the Evans and Caldwell families. In facing these truths, in choosing integrity over comfortable lies, we had found something precious. Not just justice or redemption, but freedom. Freedom from the weight of secrets, from the poison of deception, from the prison of appearances that had trapped Nancy for so long. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I'm thinking that the truth really does set you free. It's not just a saying." "No," he agreed softly. "It's a promise." And as we sat there together, the gentle rain washing the world clean outside our home, I knew it was a promise we would keep, to ourselves, to Lily, to the future we were building on honest ground. The Evans family legacy had been transformed, not erased, redeemed, not forgotten. And in that redemption, we had found not just peace, but purpose. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But sometimes, from the ashes, you can build something new, something stronger, truer, and far more beautiful than what came before.